is what the alternative is. We've been in Afghanistan for 8 years. The chairman gave a figure for the amount of money that's been appropriated to Afghanistan during that time. It's been a very large number. The question is, what results have we received for that investment? It's my sense that there's a broad consensus that we haven't received a very good return on that investment by the U.S. taxpayer. This is why Secretary Clinton said that looking at the effort, looking at the results achieved, was heartbreaking. And I mentioned the Iraq case because that's another case that has happened contemporaneously with our investment in Afghanistan, where we Congress appropriated $20–40 billion for civil side assistance, and it produced a very poor result. Now, so the advantage of that investment thus far has been greater accountability. We appropriated it through the standard modalities for foreign assistance, which meant that it went to U.S. agencies who used U.S. contractors who were used to the U.S. rules for accounting for the money. The problem with it is that too often the investments made with that money were not synced up with Afghan priorities and institutional capacity in such a way that it moved the Afghan government towards greater capacity and self-sufficiency and self-governance, and in other words, further towards a point at which we could eventually scale down our presence, both military and civilian. So the first point is what the alternatives are. I'm suggesting that the business as usual has not worked very well. I think this is consistent with the President's new strategy for Afghanistan and Pakistan, which calls for a new approach. My second point is what the approach that I'm recommending would entail. Again, I'm not suggesting that we simply, transfer all of the money that we would have appropriated through the systems we know and trust directly into the Afghan budget. By no means. I think this is something that has to take place. That has to be done gradually, and I think it's already the first steps of it may already be in motion. There have been some cases where intensive work with particular ministries has given our agencies comfort that that ministry is now ready to receive a greater degree of budget support. And I think USAID's work with the Ministry of Health is one of the examples there. But my argument is that we need to do that on a broader scale, and doing that is something that will require intensive technical assistance in public financial management. Fortunately, we're not starting from scratch. As I said, the World Bank and the IMF have been working on this since 2001, have produced reams of documents about it, there are detailed assessments of how the state of the system and the confidence that we can have in it. And we have a further advantage in that we appear to be in the process of sending over a significant number of additional civilians and or military reservists to focus on civil side assistance. Many of those people could be used to help enable this public finance focus, stationed at every level of the Afghan government, given sufficient training in public financial management that they could help us track it. But the point is that the money has to go through the Iraqi institutions with us on the outside helping the institutions work, rather than going through us on the outside providing the benefits to the Afghans.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Flake. Mr. Foster, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Let's say I'd like to, with unanimous consent, I'd like to enter this into the record. This is a document which is Volume 1 of the Afghan Judicial Reports.
Without objection, so ordered. Which
my father was involved in producing in 1975 and 1976, where he essentially rode circuit in a Land Rover to the local, well, whoever it was that was in charge of making making legal decisions at the time. And I recommend it to anyone that it's very sobering reading to understand the huge chasm that exists between a modern, functioning Western legal system and what was in place at least in 1975 and has probably gone backwards, is my guess, because of the wars in the time period. And so my questions to Mr. Pam and Mr. Maji are, what is the structure of the Afghan legal system today, and what are the useful alliances that could be encouraged to build a functional legal infrastructure? Are the alliances with Western or Islamic countries going to be more valuable in this? And if Islamic alliances are the best, with whom? You know, where are the Islamic partners that may have high-functioning legal systems that could be most easily culturally adapted to Afghanistan?
Are you asking the question of Mr. Foster?
Either one. All right.
Well, I'll answer briefly because I'm not, although I'm a lawyer, I have never worked on legal issues with respect to Afghanistan. I would just say that I think you raise an excellent point in distinguishing between, in asking the question of whether Islamic technical assistance on the legal system might be more effective coming from Islamic lawyers than from Western lawyers, and I think that is, you know, the larger point there is that we face we face a decision generally in providing assistance of whether we want to. Our goal is to set it up to look like our system, which in many cases implies a Herculean effort. Because they're coming from very different starting points, not only in terms of economic development, but culturally, religiously, legally, or whether we want to focus on what's there and what other resources are much closer to what's there in order to produce incremental improvements.
All right, Mr. Maji, did you hear the question? Well, and have.
Yes, I heard the question, and I think it's an excellent question. I think we've got to divide the legal system or the rule of law into various parts. I think there are certain parts of the legal system which would, you know, which we can associate with internationally. You know, do we have a policy for investment? Do we have a policy for trade? And so on and so forth. I think where the Islamic issues come in is when it comes into conflict resolution amongst communities, amongst personal wealth, and so on. And the Constitution of Afghanistan certainly makes provision for the Islamic system to be used under different interpretations of the faith. So, for example, the Hanafi and the Shia. Now, I mean, I think while there might be particular areas that need to be developed specific to this case, but in the context of wider Islamic law or how it's been used in Islamic countries, I think we need to draw on countries like Malaysia, for example. I mean, Malaysia is an extremely progressive Islamic state. Some countries like Bahrain in the Middle East, who has also sort of made progress. And I think your point is extremely valid, because we should welcome or draw in the inputs of these countries in trying to help Afghanistan shape its legal system.
And Mr. Maji, I was interested also in your discussion of the difficulty of obtaining clear title to many plots of land as being an impediment to economic development. As I remember my father talking about a plot of land that was claimed by 6 different people, and they've been arguing about it for generations as to who actually owned it. And it strikes me there may be an opportunity for us to make a contribution by actually establishing a central database of who owns what. This is a sort of technical project that the U.S. actually could help out with. And then, of course, you'd have to go through and make all the independent educations. And I was wondering if you thought that was a promising avenue for U.S. or foreign assistance.
I would agree with you, sir. I think that is an extremely needed area in Afghanistan. Land registration or land ownership goes under the title deeds here, they call them kawalas. And you have a huge set of issues. You have corruption and fake kawalas. you had two administrations in Afghanistan, the Taliban and the pre-Taliban, and a lot of refugees were moved over to Pakistan, Iran. Land was taken over by the Taliban, resold, new kawalas given. This system of land rights amongst families here is that, your father would then pass it on, divide the land equally amongst your children, and there's often disputes amongst children as to how much land is owned by whom, because there's no clarity of documentation. And I think any effort that can be made with trying to bolster up the municipality and other areas of government, the Ministry of Urban Development, to look at land registration so that it becomes a credible document from which they can turn land into capital is only valuable.
Thank you. Yield
Thank
back.
you, Mr. Foster. Mr. Murphy, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I missed opening remarks, so Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you mentioned this, but in Dr. Usman, in our trip that Chairman Tierney and myself and a few other members of the committee took earlier this year, we heard stories about farmers who were spending more money paying customs charges, paying tariffs, paying different forms of extorted payments as they transported their goods through the country to whatever port the goods were going to an extent that it essentially canceled out the benefit of producing the good in the first place, which was consequently driving people to the illicit trades in which they were not responsible for the transport of those goods. Can you talk a little bit about where we stand today in terms of the difficulty of transporting agricultural products throughout the country and what we need to be doing as a government in terms of trying to make that process easier?
So I think, the situation from the time I was there has been, as I heard, has been improved a lot. And generally, that observation that you had, it is true. But especially in the case of border trades, supposed trucks that are taking fruits through Pakistan, and several times the trucks is unloaded and loaded. By the time it reach India, it completely, especially grapes, is rotten. And lately there has been some agreements that to improve the situation. And one of the things that implicitly I indicated in my paper, that these farmer associations, producer associations, marketing association has to be formed, because farmers in Afghanistan are small and weak. That way, through their association, in direct contact with the final customers, then they would find a sort of political pressure hand to see these things would improve. And at the present time, we have, I think, something like 1,000 of these associations, but they are so weak financially, technically, that they could not stand and fight for their benefit. I think it needs both from the government side and from the grassroots side. We have to mobilize the people. Thank you.
Great. Let me ask a more general question to the panel, and that's this. I think whether we're talking about our military or diplomatic or economic progress in countries in which we occupy, benchmarks, continue to be a problem in terms of trying to identify our levels of success. And so, as you look 5 years out, maybe even 10 years out, to the Afghan economy, what are the benchmarks for success that we should be looking at to try to decide whether our investment there has made the kind of gains that we hope? What are the indicators that we need to be looking at in a 5 or 10 year time frame that help us understand the success or failure of our mission there?
Well, I think the benchmark from, let's say, agriculture, which is 80% of the population live in the rural area, and their life is directly and indirectly connected with agriculture. The benchmark there would be productivity in agriculture. Suppose it, like we have 95,000 hectares of land which is devoted to orchard. If we see that the benchmark is that to double that hectarage, and according to the expert, even the present orchard could be increased, the yield could be increased or could be doubled. If that would happen, if the production of wheat per hectare reach to the level of neighboring countries, then we are really successful on the national level, not on the small project here and there that would be temporarily and not long-lasting sort of indicators that would make the country to stand on their feet. Thank you.
Mr. Pam or Ms. Callier?
Yeah. Well, I'd like to, with your permission, interpret your question more broadly than just benchmarks for the economy, but benchmarks for appropriate to the civil side effort more broadly. The benchmark that I, in my written testimony, the benchmark I suggest we use as a benchmark budget execution performance. And that is, which is to say, how much they are spending through their system. It is obviously just merely spending money is a very gross measure, as we know. But in my experience, using a metric like that would have the benefit of focusing the Americans working in the country who are supposed to be building capacity of the Afghan institutions, focusing them on ways to improve that specific element of performance. And it's something that everyone understands. And the number will start out low. I think there was a reference in previous testimony to the Afghans only being able to spend 40% of their development budget. Those numbers like that are common in the developing world. Budget execution is a problem in every emerging market. But you start with a number like that. You give the effort, the objective, the task of doing what's necessary to improve that number, so that that money does flow more effectively through the system with less leakage and producing more results at the end. And I think what you end up with is both a more focused and effective U.S. effort on the one hand, and an Afghan government which is producing more results on the other.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Murphy. I look at the testimony of all of the witnesses, and I see one common tie about credit, availability of credit. Mr. Usman spoke about it, about enhancing government credibility with better credit in the agricultural realm on that. Mr. Pam talked about the need to better use Afghan capacity, said there was plenty of entrepreneurial spirit out there, but capital was a problem on that. Mr. Mauji talked about expanding significantly the outreach of a broad range of financial services throughout the country. And Ms. Callier, you talked about it as well, and talked about the Afghan Growth Fund and expanding the capital flow into small and medium enterprises in Afghanistan. So let me start with you, Ms. Callier, because we haven't heard enough from you. Does the infrastructure exist to increase that flow of capital? Is there enough structure there for the writing of these types of loans, to the administration of the loans? What about security or collateral on those loans? And just round that out for everybody to comment on, what would a well-run enterprise fund look like if we decided to go in that angle on that? And then at the end, I'll ask Mr. Pam to talk a little bit about his comment that enterprise funds have failed elsewhere. But Ms. Callier, can you help us there?
Well, I think, excuse me, yes. Well, we're certainly, I think what we are finding is a surprising level of demand. So there are, as many have said, there's a real entrepreneurial culture, but what has been missing is the ability to really apply that desire in a very practical way, because access to capital has been lacking. But it's more than just the capital. It's also providing the various other kinds of support. We were talking about the need for proper accounting and so on. So it's a business building effort that requires capital, but also various types of technical support. And I think we've also said it's important to make sure that the reach is beyond Kabul. You know, we're trying at a limited way to do that. I think in order to reach some of the other areas, we would certainly need some additional support. But it's a very important thing because I think otherwise, you know, in answer to one of the other questions, a lot of the potential economic benefit is being left on the table because you're not doing the value addition in country, you're exporting, you know, raw product, or you're not getting the distribution to the places where it needs to go. So the demand is there, it's challenging, but these challenges are not all unique to Afghanistan, and I think, you know, in terms of what's needed, whether it's an enterprise fund or more for larger investments or more smaller investments, it's the combination of the capital and the technical assistance, and then trying to structure in a way that's culturally sensitive in an Islamic culture, as well as dealing with the constraints that one has in the legal system. But there are ways to do it, and you can get good repayment rates at the microfinance level, and we found at the SME level as well.
Thank you. Dr. Usman, what would that loan situation look like in Afghanistan that might be different than a Western loan? Ms. Kalia just mentioned it might be, be culturally sensitive in the way that we're getting this money out to the entrepreneurs and the terms on which they're done. How might that differ than what we in the West would consider a loan prospect? Well,
in Afghanistan, let's say the example, at the time of the king, we had 3 or 4 specialized banks. There was Agriculture Development Bank, Trade Bank, and Industrial Development Banks. And I don't know who went there and came with the idea that these specialized banking, we don't have experience worldwide, let's cancel them from Afghanistan too. And without actually considering that there were experience, that actually this Agriculture Development Bank received 3 loans from at the time of the king, at the time of Dawood, from the World Bank, and they are handling it fine. The people repayment was picking up, and the farmers were really happy in Afghanistan, and now all these Minister of Agriculture, everywhere they go, the people ask, where is the credit for us? And in the form of vouchers, the government gave, I think with the help of the donors, something like $100 million voucher system. That collection of that is negligible. But the people are used to get the loan, like in here, and pay the interest and pay it back. If we continued, the governor of Iraq, at the time Ismail Khan was the governor, that branch that stayed in Iraq, in Iraq, he gave it some capital and said, go ahead, you start your operation. And everybody was happy there. I don't see that much difference, because if you have the technical capacity, improve the accounting system, improve the banking system, and especially in agriculture, if you connected these associations, farmer associations, put them in the board of the bank, and put them in, eventually probably they would be the owner of the bank, it would be really a good system. The system is working here. In some other countries that I had seen is working. Suppose that I was working with Egypt, they were Agriculture Development Bank there, they were giving $5 billion a year as lending to the farmers and to the agro-business people. And they were successful.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Flake.
Thank you. Mr. Osman, just follow up. To what extent are the NGOs that are operating locally purchasing food from local vendors and farmers?
There was for national security purposes, I think at one time, if I can remember correctly, they bought something like 10,000 or 15,000 tons locally. But NGOs, so far, as I see, they don't buy from local market. And that is a difficulty, is that I say there is international market right in Afghanistan. in Afghanistan, that the soldiers are there and the foreign community is there, then if we build the standards, laboratory facilities, certificates, and all the documents, then, you know, that would open up for Afghanistan product inside the country, and then later on, like FDA, they could establish to make the quality control check for the both domestic and international. Right now, the difficulty is that even wheat that is the flour is imported from the neighboring countries in Afghanistan.
Thank you. Mr. Pham, how realistic is it to move significantly from poppy production over a sustained period of time? And in that question is the problem where it seems that the government has certainly, I sensed it in the couple of visits that I've made to Afghanistan. From the first visit to the second visit, there seemed, at least with the President's office, less of a commitment to fight the drug war, if you will, and to a lot less candor in terms of what's going on outside of Kabul. To what extent, I mean, how difficult is it going to be to offer the incentives? How long is it going to take to move to, whether it's pomegranate or whatever else, to offer something sustainable, particularly if the government doesn't seem as committed as perhaps they should be to move away from poppy production?
Congressman, I am not an expert on the agricultural sector and that issue. And
in terms of the government, though, in terms of the government's commitment there, do you sense, and this goes back to the problem of how much do we run these programs through the government, do you sense an increased commitment or lessened commitment over the last couple of years to transition away from poppies?
I'm not sure. I haven't had any discussions with the government on that subject.
All right. Mr. Usman, you look like you're itching to answer that. Go ahead.
I think based on my experience, the government is fully committed to actually find alternative to poppy production. But we have to, you know, there is one commitment on the paper. One, actually, the work would be done. But the government, we have to build the infrastructure of the government to actually conduct that activity. The infrastructure is not there. There was, at the time of King, in the time of Dawood, we have 24 research stations, 14 sub-research, and 7 main research stations. None of those research stations is working. You have to improve you have to produce seedling somewhere. You know, for this time, it might be a good idea to provide free seedling for the farmers. And then you have to provide proper technical support packages to the farmers, how to they grow. There is new varieties of almond that would bear fruit, I think, in 3 to 5 years. Then with that, then you have to teach the farmers how to do mixed farming. But you know, the unfortunate thing is that a lot of experienced farmers that migrated outside Afghanistan, they died and they could not pass the skills that they had to the new generation. And the government, the government does not have capacity and means to do it, while the commitment is there, but we have to establish, as you say it, the infrastructure for it. That infrastructure is not there.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Blake. Mr. Kennedy, we passed you up on the first round because you stepped out for a second. We apologize for that.
No problem. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We recognize you for 10 minutes.
Thank you for your commitment to this issue and your work. I welcome the panelists. Just following up on that past question, it's hard for me to think that the government's really committed to the restriction of poppy growth when you see the enormous economic value that it provides for the country of Afghanistan. What is currently the percentage of poppy crop in Afghanistan as a percentage overall poppy growth in the world? Do you know?
Well, I have more information from the newspaper, probably Mr. Congressman,
Well,
as
in
you
terms
do.
of a crop,
it is, they say, 92% or something like that.
Yeah.
But I think we have to give to the farmers improved package, as Ms. Claire was mentioning. You know, the time I was there, even the dry fruit and nuts, which could compete with poppy, because in India they really appreciate and pay higher product for supposed almond of Afghanistan. At that time that we made a rough budgeting analysis, it was 2 hectares of supposed almond that could substitute on profit basis 1 hectare of poppy. And with the value added, and you would have the processing, packing, cleaning, grading right at the farmer field and involve the farmers there, then probably it could compete on an economic term. But right now, if if 70% of the irrigated land is devoted to wheat production, in the wheat it takes 1 hectare of poppy to substitute it with 14 to 24 hectares of wheat, the revenue of that. With this divergency, there would be all the time problem, and sometime for the politician it would be difficult to convince the people to actually apply that. But if we go in this other route, then probably the government would be, make their argument clearly with the people, and the people would be, that would be a convincing argument. Thank you, sir.
Why are we not doing that? The nuts and the fruits?
Well, as I was saying, sir, we don't have the infrastructure to do it. The research, the extension, the technology, the technical know-how of the world, we have to build it. In the last 7 years, I have all respect for the different people involved. That you would see in 2 districts, the NGO is involved in sort of upgrading the wheat, but then the proper seed for it was not there to actually give it to the farmers.
Yeah,
but
I
that
hear what
proper
you're saying.
strategy.
Well, they've done it in Pakistan, from what I understand. We've been working with the agricultural, because Pakistan's had a huge poppy crop, and they've worked very hard to try to eradicate it, doing exactly what you said, substituting with the nuts and
and I can
and
say
they've successfully done that in many parts of Pakistan. And if it takes so long to do the wheat, and the wheat's a no-go in terms of the farmers, then I think we should just move right on to what the local people think is what works. And if it takes the infrastructure, that's what we need to do.
Exactly.
So I think we should listen to that message loud and clear and get with the program.
And the nut processor that we've lent funds to is telling us that they cannot meet the demand in the Indian market for the higher value, better quality processed nuts. And that goes directly to his point that the agricultural infrastructure needs to be there to support the production, so that when you've got the capital for the processing facility and the ability to bring that value added back to the farmer level, you will be able to do it if you've invested at the agriculture.
What I'm trying to figure out, Mr. Chairman, is why there's a missing, connection here. Why we're forcing this wheat thing on them when it's clear that the locals are not really into it.
If the gentleman will yield it, that's exactly why there's 2 parts to this hearing. One part is to talk to these folks that are with us this morning, and the second part is going to be talking to the administration. I don't think they can answer for the last 7 years, but by the time they come in at the end of the summer or the fall, they'll have to answer for January 20th till now, whether or not they're follling the wiser course or continuing on a less wise course.
Let me ask you just another question on health care.
In continuation of your answer, we have 4.5 million hectares of dry land farming. If we suppose it give to the farmers, provide to the farmers technology to increase the yield, average yield from 0.6 to that dry land Afghanistan is getting to 2 tons, that is neighboring is getting it. This 4.5 million hectares would bring something like 8 to 9 million tons of grain. Afghanistan needs something like 6 million tons. There would be, devote in the long run all the lines, irrigated lines, to high-value horticultural crops. But that technology, that research is not there.
Let me ask you, with respect to landmines, is there a problem when you're doing any of this agriculture with landmines left over from the former, Soviet war?
Well, I think that has been main problem. It's the farmers are doing this with a lot of casualty anyhow because of the necessity, but that landmine in some part is still there.
Would it be useful for us to try to get the Physicians Without Borders, those who do the rehabilitative medicine, to try to help do more satellite communication, so forth, help consult with doctors there for more rehab medicine, so those farmers and their families and the like who happen to get...
Sure.
I mean,
could I say something on this point about agriculture? I think Dr. Usman makes an excellent point in emphasizing the need for infrastructure. And I think the infrastructure that he's referring to it's worth noting that it's state infrastructure. The need to rebuild an agricultural extension system within Afghanistan is the need for a national program. This could be part of this could be one of the key sector roadmaps described.
God, Mr. Pan.
Yeah.
Can you get us some of the statistics on these injuries as a result of landmines, and what it would be your proposal to see what NGOs could help in terms of rehabilitative medicine for those farmers and the like who get injured as a result of because I understand Afghanistan is littered with landmines. And I just want to know what we're doing to help in rehabilitative medicine.
But I wasn't saying anything about landmines.
I know you weren't.
Okay.
I'm asking you
Okay.
now because you are part of the
Sure.
Sustainable Development of U.S. Institute of Peace to help us with this.
Certainly.
And in terms of infrastructure for health care, there's very little drinking water and sewage. What is going on with that for the farmer and for the population there in terms of public health? Can you tell us about what's going on there in terms of building infrastructure? I mean, you can't have much of a farming life and community if people can't have drinking water.
Yes, I'm afraid I can't give you any detail on the efforts, the water efforts in particular. But I can look into it along with landmines.
Okay. Maybe.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, please.
Just a couple of comments. One referring to the question on health and water, but the other one also on narcotics. And just to say that on the narcotics side, our experience has been in Afghanistan that it's very, very difficult to compete with any kind of agricultural productivity in the wake of just the sheer income revenues that are coming in from narcotics. For example, we would pay $2 a day just to build a canal or a road to unskilled laborers. The narcotic poppy growers will pay $15 a day plus 3 meals to harvest the poppy at the same construction period during the year. And we really have to ask ourselves, do we compete with narco wage prices, or do we stop our projects? And I fear that while the points being made on agriculture and so on are absolutely valid, and we believe that the infrastructure needs to come into place in terms of improving the agricultural prospects, we will not be able to really address the narcotics issue until there is a sense of consequence for the people who grow it. And I fear that there is a large amount of impunity at this point in time, with very, very, we've got various carrots, but very, very little sticks to stop them. And experience has also shown that large-scale eradication doesn't really help. I mean, it makes the poorer poorer. It doesn't affect the rich. So we really need to look at a multi-pronged strategy that looks at targeted eradication, but that also looks at naming and shaming commanders, interdicting routes that are quite traditional. And I mean, I can tell you in areas where we operate in northeastern Afghanistan, farmers are able to tell us what time, how much narcotics is going to cross at what point in the border. And the reason they can do it is because it's such common knowledge. It's pure impunity. There is no stake to go with narco production. With regards to the second question on water and healthcare, I have to say that the basic packages and essential package of health services that are provided by USAID have gone a long way in terms of reaching out to basic healthcare in the villages. The whole notion of water has been less well tackled, yet it's one of the smaller investments that one makes, $100,000, $200,000 in a village or a cluster of villages, and you drop child morbidity by about 40 or 50%. And it's something that we've been not pioneering, but certainly advocating for with other colleagues working in Afghanistan, that doing basic water supplies is extremely important. But the government also needs to look at the whole issue of water supply in a much broader policy level as to how we're going to tackle the needs for water in what is a very, very diverse geographic landscape in Afghanistan, from the Pamirs and the Hindu Kush going northeast to almost a desert situation in the south, where the solutions to the problems are going to be very different. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you, Mr. Kennedy, for your questions. They were well placed. One of the interesting notes that our expert on the staff here just pointed out, the $37 billion spent in Afghanistan is $37 billion. Less than 1% has gone to agriculture. Less than 1%. And that was 80% of the economy. So for all of our witnesses, I guess the staggering point, if I can speak for Mr. Flake as well, to us would be, who's doing the central planning here? Who's doing the overarching view of what needs to be done that's important? Who's deciding what projects are the ones that ought to be prioritized, and then making sure that something gets done? I know the Aga Khan has done significant work there. They're the largest private investor in Afghanistan. So is there any functioning entity, a comprehensive planning group that pulls all of the NGOs, all the private investors, all the government investors together and says there's a simple thing like spending a couple $100,000 in a cluster of villages is going to be that helpful for public health, who talks about the landmines and what we might do on that effort, who talks about putting more than 1% of all the money that's coming in toward 80% of the prospect, who talks about, as Ms. Collier indicates, getting more capital into flow. Just from each of the four of you, very briefly, because I understand we're back in session on the floor, but what do you know about whether or not that kind of an entity exists, what their work has been doing, or what's been planned in that regard? I'll start with you, Mr. Maushi, please.
It's a very, very valid question. I have to say that there is much better and increased coordination in recent months, particularly under the leadership of the United Nations. And I think the UN, together with the government of Afghanistan, have tried to look at much more concerted, coordinated mechanisms that allow us to be more accountable, but also look at specific priorities within the rural areas. But I have to say that with a caveat, because I do believe that while there's a lot of rhetorical thinking and coordination about it, we don't really today have a Kandahar Development Forum, or we don't have a Helmand Development Forum or a Badakhshan Development Forum that sits in Kabul, that sits in the province in a systematic fashion and says, what is the package that we need to bring in, and how is this investment going to come in to make a real difference to the quality of people's lives?
Thank you. Ms. Collier.
I would have to say that, we have worked fairly independently in terms of what we've done. We've gotten, good support in terms of access to the credit line that we're now using for lending through OPIC. But in terms of, broad-based interaction on the ground with the aid agencies, there really hasn't been much. We try to stay in contact, but trying to figure out what exactly you're asking what that strategy is. It's not a simple process.
I'm not exactly saying it's your responsibility, because I commend the work
I
that you
think
do.
that's right. But I think
the fact of the matter is, commending the work that you do, you may not be doing the highest priority work for that society. So as much as you're doing it, as well as you're doing it, and as hard as your,
Yeah,
your
exactly.
effort is,
Exactly.
nobody has helped you focus on what their needs are. It's
I mean, I
staggering.
think there can be more coordination for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Dr. Usman.
Yes, sir. I actually was working in the Ministry of Planning before the Russian invasion. And at that time, one, it was our responsibility that to see that priorities taken into consideration, and based on the priorities, we allowed the budget and then control the budget quarterly, how much they spend, how much work is accomplished. But that ministry, now I think they call it Ministry of Economy, and that is getting quite weaker and probably could not do this job. And at the time I was there, President Karzai's government under the professor that came by name of Ishaq Nadiri, they were doing that job, but they didn't have that many expertise to actually conduct that job properly. Now the UN, with the help of Afghans, are doing it. I think, I think it is really a good step to actually create something like that, to actually see and coordinate the activity. Even in each ministry, there should be, you know, like one of the difficulties we had in Ministry of Agriculture, there were 20 donors in each one of them based on their country policy, one of them going one direction, another going another direction, another going another direction. There was not that much coordination, and there was not that much capacity to coordinate within that ministry. And I think that has to be done, and that capacity has to be strengthened in the macro level and also in the micro and the sectoral level. Thank you, sir.
Part of my understanding is that Mr. Holbrook is supposed to be working in this effort, and we'll certainly want to find out how that's going. Mr. Pam, do you want to just wrap that up with Mr. Flake's indulgence?
Yeah, I thank you for the question. I think it is one of the most important questions that we have to ask, and I agree with the way Dr. Usman has just framed it. I addressed this in my written testimony. When development intervention A is the priority for donor X, and development intervention B is the priority for donor Y, and in the case of Afghanistan, you have to multiply that. You have, you know, A through Z, double A through double Z, to include all of the countries, all of the NGOs operating in the country. What you have is everyone doing A through Z and double A through double Z, and a very incoherent approach. Now, in theory, you could have an international body like the UN Assistance Mission in Afghanistan performing that coordinating function, and UNAMA has tried. But UNAMA doesn't have the authority to direct the programs of individual donors. And so my conclusion is that the only way to accomplish that kind of coordination is to fall back on the entity that has the strongest authoritative claim to be responsible for coordinating and prioritizing, which is the government of Afghanistan itself. The system worked when it was the Ministry of Planning working, but the Ministry of Planning, the Ministry of Finance have been taken out, have been disempowered. And my recommendation to focus on Afghan public finance and budgets is in part motivated by the desire to find a way to put them back in the loop in order, in substantial part, to solve this coordination problem.
I guess that's part of the tension, you know, that we find up here. If we were to look at trying to put the money through the Afghan government, because that's a way of coordinating around their budget priorities, but then to see that one of their priorities is to weaken those very agencies that would probably be best at coordinating all of the various efforts, sort of puts a conflict up there. And the Karzai government in particular, weakening those agencies, as Mr. Marji said, you know, having no punitive aspect at all to those people that are transporting the opium, you know, like, not necessarily the growers, but those on the chains above that, just letting them get away with impunity. Those kinds of decisions make it difficult for us up here to say, okay, let's put all our eggs in that basket. It seems to us that's going to take a lot of work, particularly where Dr. Usman had testified earlier. A lot of that human capacity no longer exists. They're either moved out of country for fear of their physical condition or their families, have been killed in some of the conflicts, or have gone because there were no jobs, nobody was taking advantage of their skills, and moved on. So,
well, may I just throw in one more?
One more frustration? Sure. Go right ahead.
Well, a potential part of the problem, which is, I understand your reservations about putting all your eggs in a basket that you have, finite confidence in. But this is why I think that part of the solution might lie with fiscal decentralization and, in my terms, creating multiple entities that have budgets and that are closer to the people and that have responsibility for performing some of the governmental functions, providing some of the essential services. That then creates a competitive environment where we're not solely reliant on the national government. Neither we nor the people of Afghanistan are solely reliant on one government, and instead can sort of go to multiple governments and try to encourage at least some of those governmental entities to perform.
And I guess that focuses even more importance on the number of civilians and the nature of that civilians' experience that the President has recommended sending in, as well as other members of the international community are sending in. Mr. Flake, do you have any further questions?
No further questions. Just a comment. I think you hit on the most relevant point here. There seems to be, from the testimony, a need, and we've heard this again and again and again, I think, for greater coordination. And so I'm very anxious to hear the administration's plan come the fall. I hope that they're monitoring this hearing to get a taste of your testimony and what you've said here. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Flake. Thanks for your participation in the hearing and your ideas. I want to thank all of our witnesses. Mr. Mauji, thank you from afar. We've really benefited from having your expertise, and congratulate you on the work that your agency is doing in Afghanistan and elsewhere. All the witnesses that are here today, thank you very, very much for both your written testimony, your conceptualizing of this, helping us frame the questions, as well as look at some of the answers, and the time spent here this morning. I agree with my colleague, Mr. Flake, that we want to really grill the administration on where they are and where they're going on this. But I think we might expand it out, too, as to where some of the international organizations are playing in on this. Where is the UN in terms of coordination? What other international agencies might be playing a role in that, or at least if Mr. Pam says that nobody seems to have the authority to do it, who has had the capacity to step up and to suggest that we all volunteer to work together and set some framework up for that. So again, thank you very much. We're privileged by your testimony and appreciate it a great deal. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.